Hello, everybody. It has been a very long time. I cannot tell you how excited I am to be sitting in this chair with a microphone in front of me, the camera right over there. I mean, you're right there. I'm happy to be back. I really have missed this. Today, we're going to talk about game theory. We're going to talk about Jesus Christ. We're going to talk about Nietzsche. We're going to talk about objective morality. We're going to talk about Robert Sapolsky and chimpanzees and Jordan Peterson. We're going to cover so many things. Thank you for being here. Before I even get into this video today, I'll address the elephant in the room. I've been gone for a long time. I'm not going to go into it too much because it doesn't really translate, especially like years from now. If you're watching this, then I haven't been gone at all. It's kind of weird the way that things live forever on the internet. But without further ado, I'm going to jump into a clip that's going to kind of introduce what I'm talking about today. We're going to jump all over the place, and then we're going to try and pull it all together. This is a clip taken from a live stream that I did, the last live stream that I did with Seth from Transcendent Philosophy and Stephen from This Saint's Theory. Seth dropped some knowledge on me that I wasn't ready for, and I've been chewing on it for a while. So we're going to watch that video. Then we're going to back up a little bit, and then we're going to progress from there. So let's get into the clip.
I have a quick comment which ties all of this back to my meta-ethical theory.
Beautiful. I love it, Seth. What is it?
So I tend to think that the concepts of God or religious frameworks in general are personifications of game theory. So we've got this objective moral we've got objective morality, which is what's the best game theory. Right. All of these groups, they're trying to latch on to the best strategy, and they're inventing a religion, which is a system of strategies for the group, and they're experimenting and fighting with each other and kind of like, maybe there's a good strategy over here, we're going to mix it in with ours. And the concept of God is this evolving game theory.
All right, so we just heard Seth talk about how different societies, different groups are participating in different game theories. And they're trying to attach to what you would consider to be an objectively better game theory. Now, we can have the conversation. I love this because it's really hard to have a conversation about, is this action better than this action? And the reason I say that, I've had a couple different discussions with a couple different theists on YouTube. And the point that gets missed in this conversation about objective morality here, a theist will very easily tell an atheist like myself, you don't have a standard by which you can say that one thing is better than another. And that's true. I actually don't. I don't think that I can. Seth has built out a beautiful one. I recommend looking at his channel, but I have a hard time really concreting something like that. But my response to the theist when they say this to me is, I may not have a way to ground what I'm saying into the real world, but you're grounding it in something that can't be proven, right? Your claim to objective morality is it's either good because God commands it, and if that's the case, then show me the proof that God has commanded it, right? Show me the proof that God exists, right? We go down that whole rabbit hole. It's turtles all the way down, nothing. Or God commands it because it's good. Okay, show me how it's good, right? By what standards is it good? While theists will tell an atheist that I can't ground my morality in anything, theists can only ground their morality in something that can't be proven. So I see this as a draw. I don't see one person having a better argument than the other, because at the end of the day, nothing has a foundation. Nothing can be proved. So I love the way that Seth is talking about how what we're trying to do is we're trying to find more optimized strategies. We're trying to find a strategy that makes civilization better, and we're trying to latch onto that and adopt it as a group. Even if it's impossible to say that this one is operating perfectly, it is possible to look at a world and say the countries or the places or the groups who employ these game theory tactics are happier and wealthier and dying of starvation less, yada, yada, yada. So I love that he's putting this in such practical terms. So now we're going to jump to a video. This is a lecture series that Stanford put out. I became obsessed with them a while ago. I told all my friends to listen to Robert Sapolsky. We're going to jump into one of his lectures, and we're going to kind of meander through this lecture. We're going to get to the points that I'm talking about, but we're going to make some observations along the way. So we're going to jump into that right now.
Okay, so you're back reading those Time, Life, Nature books back when, and there was always a style of thing you would go through, which is they describe some species doing something absolutely amazing and unlikely, and it goes like this. The giraffe has a long neck, and it obviously has to have a big heart to pump all that blood up there, and you lock up a whole bunch of biomechanics people with slide rules, and out they come out with this prediction as to how big the giraffe heart should be and how thick the walls, and you go and you measure a giraffe heart, and it's exactly what the equations predicted. And you say, isn't nature amazing? Or you read about some like desert rodents that drink once every 3 months, and another bunch of folks have done math and figured out like how many miles long the renal tubules have to be, and somebody goes and studies it, and it's exactly as you expected. Isn't nature wonderful? No, nature isn't wonderful. You couldn't have giraffes unless they had hearts that were that big. You couldn't have rodents living in the desert unless they had kidneys that worked in a certain way. There is an inevitable logic about how organisms function, how organisms are built, how organisms have evolved, solving this problem of optimizing a solution. And what the next 2 lectures are about is you can take the same exact principles and apply them to thinking about the evolution of behavior. The same sort of logic where just as you could sit there and with logical principles come to the point of saying, a giraffe's heart is going to be this big, you can go through a different realm of logic built around evolutionary principles and figure out all sorts of aspects of social behavior.
You can tell this is going to be a juicy one, right? Can you tell that this lecture is going to be interesting because he's already saying mind-blowing things? I want to start with some of the implications of what he just said, because yes, we are getting to game theory and social behavior. We are on our way. You can kind of feel it like inching that direction. But he just blasted a hole in the teleological argument for God, the fine-tuning argument for God, which is it's a weird one. I don't personally see any merit for it. When I talked to Hayden a few weeks ago from Thoughtful Saint, a few weeks ago, what am I talking about? When I talked to the Thoughtful Saint, when I talked to the Thoughtful Saint guys, this is what they consider to be the most compelling argument for God. And Sapolsky just practically explains here why it doesn't make any sense. So he talks about a giraffe, right? In order for a giraffe to exist, its heart would have to be this big. They ran the test. They found out, wow, it is this big. So it's the same with humans, right? We've heard theists for a long time now saying, look at the distance that the Earth is from the sun. If it were one planet too close, it would be too hot. If it were one planet too far, it would be too cold. That it's perfect, right? Or look at the percentage of oxygen that's in the atmosphere. Look at how our lungs are so finely tuned to breathe that percentage of oxygen, right? To live and sustain themselves off of that percentage of oxygen. Well, this is silly, right? The conditions of life create the boundaries of life, okay? So if we lived on an oxygenated planet, but one closer to the sun, we would adapt. Everything that lives would have started by adapting to a warmer climate. If we lived on a planet that had much less oxygen or much more oxygen, what would happen? Would our lung? Oh no, we would die. No, because our lungs were built by this atmosphere. We were created by the environment. That's why I say the circumstances of the environment create the boundaries of life. right? The circumstances actually create what can be possible within that circuit. So the fine-tuning argument, when theists talk about it, they're talking about it backwards. They're acting as though we existed over here in this vacuum, and then the environment that we inhabit was created over here in this vacuum, and then some sort of all-knowing creator took us and did this and pushed us together. That isn't what happened. There was an environment, and it started to create what could survive within that environment. That's why the fine-tuning argument doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, so now we're getting into the aspects of how fine-tuning, evolutionary engineering, for lack of a better term, has created, in the same way that it created the heart of a giraffe, has created our behavior in order to propel ourselves forward in the evolutionary timeline. So let's get to game theory.
What is the optimal strategy in a particular social species for a particular individual? What is the optimal strategy? When do you cooperate and when do you cheat? When do you defect on the cooperative relationship you've had? And this introduces us to a whole world of mathematics built around what is called game theory. The notion that there are games, formal games, that have mathematically optimal strategies or multiple strategies, multi-equilibrium, and a whole world of research has been built around them in terms of when to cooperate and when to defect. So game theory stuff. This was starting off in a world of like people studying economics and negotiation and diplomacy and all of that. And that was a whole world built around this logic of when do you cooperate, when do you cheat. And what came out of there were all sorts of models of how to optimize behavior in terms of that. And the building block, sort of the fruit fly of game theory, is a game called the prisoner's dilemma. Prisoner's dilemma, sort of cutting to sort of getting into the details, two individuals are prisoners and they escape and they're both captured and they're interrogated separately, and if both of them refuse to talk, that's great for them. If they both squeal, they both get punished. If one of them is able to squeal on the other one, they get a great reward. If the other one, what you get formally are four possible outcomes. Both individuals cooperate. Both individuals cheat against each other. Individual A cooperates and B cheats. Individual B cooperates and A cheats. And what you get in Prisoner's Dilemma is a formal payoff for each. What gives you the greatest payoff? Stabbing the other guy in the back. You cheat and they cooperate. You have exploited them. You have taken advantage of them. Isn't that wonderful? That's the highest payoff in Prisoner Dilemma games. Second highest payoff, you both cooperate. Third highest payoff, which is beginning to not count as a payoff, but in a lot of the games is set up as the start of punishment, both of you cheat on each other. Fourth, worst possible payoff is you're the sucker, you cooperate, and the other individual stabs you in the back. So what the Prisoner's Dilemma game is, set up these circumstances where individuals will play versions of this against each other with varying rewards and that sort of thing, and parameters that we will look at in a lot of detail, and seeing when is it optimal to cooperate, when is it optimal to cheat. When would you do this? So you've got examples of this, and this was the building block. And what anyone would say looking at this is, it's obvious. What you want to do is in some way rationally maximize your payoff. This is this whole world of Homo economist, the notion of humans as being purely rational decision makers. And what you begin to see in this world of game theory is there is anything but that going on. And later in the course, we are going to see something very interesting, people playing Prisoner's Dilemma games inside a brain scanner, looking at a part of the brain that has a lot to do with pleasure. And what you see is some individuals activate that part of the brain when they've successfully stabbed the other guy in the back. Some individuals activate it when they have both cooperated, and there's a big gender difference as to which circumstance. So you just guess which one is going on there. We're going to see a number of studies like that coming down the line. So the question becomes, how do you optimize prisoner dilemma play? And what emerged at that time was the notion of all sorts of theoretical models and stuff. And then in the 1970s, there was an economist at University of Michigan named Robert Axelrod, who revolutionized the entire field. What he did was he took some Paleolithic computer and programmed in how the prisoner's dilemma would be played, and he could program in, as if there were two players, and he could program in what each one's strategy would be. And what he then did was he wrote to all of his buddies and all of his mathematician friends and prize fighters and theologians and serial murderers and Nobel Peace Prize winners, and in each case explained what was up and saying, what strategy would you use in a prisoner's dilemma game? And he gets them all back, and he programs all these different versions, and he runs a round-robin tournament. Every strategy is paired against every other strategy at one point or other, and you look at what the payoff is. You ask, which is the most optimal strategy? And out of it, shockingly to everyone, because this was a computer teaching us optimizing human behavior, out of it came one simple strategy that always outcompeted the others. This is people sitting there, probabilistic ones as to when to cooperate and lunar cycles as to what to do. The one that always won is now called tit for tat. You start off cooperating in the very first round with the individual. You cooperate. If the individual has cooperated with you in that round, you cooperate in the next round. And you cooperate as long as the other individual cooperates. But as soon as there's a round where the individual cheats against you, you cheat against them the next time. If they cheated at you that time also, you cheat against them the next time. If they go back to cooperating, you go back to cooperating the next time. You have this tit-for-tat strategy. In the absence of somebody stabbing you in the back, you will always cooperate. And what they found was run these hundreds of thousands of versions of these round-robin tournaments, and tit-for-tat was the one that was most optimal. To begin to use a word that is not just going to be a metaphor, tit-for-tat always drove the other strategies into extinction. And what you wound up seeing is this optimized strategy. And it was very clear why tit-for-tat worked so well. Number one, it was nice. You start off cooperating. Number two, it retaliates if you do something crummy to it. Number three, it is forgiving if you go back to cooperating. Number four, it's clear-cut in its play. It's not some probabilistic thing. Okay, so we have the technical way of showing prisoner's dilemma play. And first round, both individuals are cooperating. Second round, both individuals are cooperating. Third round, this one cheats. Those are fangs. This one cheats, and this one cooperates. So the next round, this one now cheats, and this one goes back to cooperating, and we've just gotten through a scary thing that tit-for-tat solves, and it's great. Wonderful. What if, though, your system is not 100% perfect? What if there's the possibility of a mistake being made, of sending the wrong signal? What if there's the possibility of noise in the communication system, and at some point an individual who does a cooperative behavior, thanks to a glitch in the system, it is read as having been defection. So what happens as a result? This individual, forget it. Okay, what happens as a result? The individual who cooperated, but somehow the message got through as cheating, they don't know. Something got lost in the wires between them in translation. The other individual is saying, whoa, that individual cheated against me. I'm going to cheat in the next round. So along comes the next round, and that individual cheats against them, this one who's cooperating, because they've been cooperating all along, they don't know about this error, and they say, whoa, that person just cheated against me. I'm going to cheat in the next round. So they cheat in the next round. This one says, whoa, they just cheated another time, again and again and again, and what you get is a seesaw pattern for the rest of time. You've just wiped out 50% of the cooperation. And what you've got is tit-for-tat strategies are vulnerable to signal error. That's something that soon came out in these studies of Axelrod's. And when I was a kid, there was like one of these like thriller books I remember reading where there's a glitch in the system. And at the time, the mean, scary Soviet Union launched a missile that, no, it was the United States. The United States, by accident, launched a missile, a nuclear weapon where they didn't mean to, some cockroach chewed through a wire someplace or other, and the missile went off and wound up destroying Moscow. And oh my God, we had a cooperative system of mutually sort of restraint of aggression, all of that. And thanks to a signal error, a cheating signal was accidentally sent off. And how did the book end? A tit-for-tat response. In order to avoid sort of thermonuclear wasteland, the Soviet Union was allowed to destroy New York. All right, so that shows exactly how you could then get into a seesawing thing simply by way of if the system has any vulnerability to signal error. So it soon became clear, as soon as Axelrod began to introduce the possibility of signal errors, that tit-for-tat didn't work as well as another strategy, one that quickly came to the forefront. And that one, for some strange reason, that's the way it's shown. That one was called forgiving tit-for-tat. What happens with forgiving tit-for-tat? The usual rule, like tit-for-tat, if you cooperate, if they cooperate, you always cooperate. If they cheat against you, you punish them in the next round. Exactly same thing as tit-for-tat. But oh no, what if there's a signal error in the system and you've gotten caught in one of these horrible seesawing things? What forgiving tit-for-tat does is we'll have a rule, for example, that if we seesaw like this 5 times in a row, I will forego cheating the next time, and instead I'll cooperate. And that will get things back on track. I am willing to be forgiving in one round in order to reestablish cooperation after the signal error came in. And that one, as soon as you introduce the possibility of signal error, that one outcompetes tit-for-tat.
So you could see how tit-for-tat, I will liken, for simplicity's sake, I know there's more to it, tit-for-tat for me is going to be Old Testament law of Moses type morality. Okay? Forgiving tit-for-tat is going to be the higher law that I think was meant to be instantiated and was instantiated by Jesus. Now, what's interesting here is that there are vulnerabilities to forgiving tit-for-tat. Now, he's going to talk about some, but I have some that he doesn't mention. So I'm going to bring up mine, and then we're going to get back to the video. Forgiveness isn't necessarily a strength. You can forgive somebody over and over and over, and they are cruel, and they don't care, and they are unempathetic, and they will just steamroll you. And in this scenario, forgiving somebody who continues to transgress the social construct that you have with them makes you out to be the fool. And this was what Nietzsche complained about when he referred to Christianity as slave morality, essentially making the point that when a weak trait is being raised to the level of a moral trait, then people can be taken advantage of over and over and over again. Now, I want to explain weakness for a second. It's not always weak to forgive, but if you are forgiving over and over because you are too cowardly to fight back and do that tit-for-tat strike, then it is a weakness. It's not a strength. So if you're forgiving out of weakness, but you're telling yourself, well, I'm a good person, I'm forgiving, right? That's not a good thing. The other thing that can happen is maybe that person forgave once or twice, didn't get steamrolled, perceived themselves to get steamrolled, then became morally indignant, developed a persecution complex, and now sees themselves walking around the world as a victim. Now, I've covered the drama triangle. It's Cartman's drama triangle in a previous video. I did it with Shalise from Cults to Consciousness. It was a very good video. I would encourage all of you to go watch it. It was a live stream. It was pretty long, but I think that the information was good. It's not good to see yourself as a victim. It really isn't. Even if you are a victim of something, even if something bad did happen to you, most people will tell you that seeing yourself as such and So while seeing yourself as a victim can sometimes be true in the sense that maybe you did suffer something that does make you a victim of a crime of some sort or an abusive relationship or something like that, I will tell you that 9 times out of 10, continuing to see yourself, I'll put it this way, looking at yourself as somebody who suffered, yes, who was victimized, and also has the capabilities within themselves to restore order to their life, that is a better strategy. So what I'm trying to say here, I guess, is forgiving can be good. As Sapolsky is explaining right now, it can get you out of some mean, what does he call them, zigzags. You don't want to develop a persecution complex, and you don't want to let somebody take advantage of you. Let's get back to the video.
There is a vulnerability here to this one, which is you could be exploited. If you're playing against, for example, a tit for tatter or all sorts of other strategies where they don't have forgiving strings of defection, and you do, what's going to happen is you're going to keep going back to cooperating, and they're going to keep stabbing you in your back. Forgiving tit for tat is vulnerable to exploitation, playing against individual players that don't have forgiveness in them. So what soon became apparent was an even better strategy, which is you start off with a tit for tat strategy, which is you are punitive, you are retaliatory amid being forgiving, clear, nice initially. You are willing to punish, and you cannot be exploited in this way. If and only if you have gone whatever number of rounds without the other individual ever cheating on you, if you've gone long enough without that happening, you switch over to forgiving tit for tat. What is that? That's deciding you trust somebody. You've had enough interactions with them that you are willing to trust them. This is the transition from pure rational optimizing to switching over. Forgiveness coming in there protects you from signal error. And of course, now a whole world of how many rounds do you need to do this before you switch that, as to what the optimal deal with that is. But again, this is a way of transitioning to solve the problem of signal error, but forgiving too readily and being taken advantage of. Soon, another strategy appeared, which was called Pavlov. And those of you who know Pavlovian psychology will see that this, in fact, has nothing whatsoever to do with Pavlovian psychology, and I don't know why they did that, but they thought it was kind of cool. But the rule was, remember, if you stab the other guy in the back, you get a bunch of points. If you both cooperate, you get points, not as many. If you both cheat, you lose some points. If you're taken advantage of, you lose a lot of points. So 2 outcomes you gain, 2 outcomes you lose. In Pavlov, the simple rule is, when I do something, if I get points, if I get some degree of reward, I do it again the next time. If I get rewarded in either of the first 2 types of payoffs, I do the same thing again. And the other part, of course, is, and if I play my strategy and I lose one of the two bottom outcomes, I switch to the other strategy the next time. And what you see is that can establish very good tit for tat stuff. But if you sit and spend hours tonight with, a long roll of toilet paper and playing out all the rounds of it, you will see what Pavlov allows you to do is exploit somebody else who is forgiving. So Pavlov goes along just fine with this, and as long as Pavlov continues, whenever they switch over to a forgiving tit for tat, Pavlov will outcompete them.
The clip that I started this whole video with was Seth saying that we are just trying to act out the best strategy for our society. I think it goes along with that stream of thought at this point, that it doesn't actually, to say that one rule or one moral law or something like that is better than another one is almost useless. Killing is wrong, and then go fight a war to protect your family. It gets so much more complicated. The point that I'm trying to make here is that the strategies that a society uses are much more important and are the closest thing that humanity will ever create that even approximates objective morality, even though I think it would be silly to call it that. When I was Mormon, I thought that morality was objective. I thought there were certain things that God says, and when he says them, that's the right thing to do, and there's never a reason to question it. As I got deeper into everything, it seems, it started to feel like if God is objective, then Mormonism can't be true. Because whether God is creating the rule and that's what makes it good, or whether God is commanding the rule because it's good, either way, he's contradicting himself. In one instance, in the book of Jacob, he's saying that David having many wives is an abomination, and that men should have one wife. Later on, he's telling Joseph Smith, oh, well, you need to marry as many women as possible. You need to, even underage women. Explain that one to me. If the justification is, well, he has to rise up a righteous seed, well, great. Then why isn't Joseph rising up a righteous seed? We know that the factory worked. We know the little factory worked because Joseph and Emma were able to have children. Why didn't Joseph have children with any of these other women that he was supposed to? It just all contradicts itself. In another example, you see, God commanding Nephi to kill Laban when he very easily could have just grabbed the plates, ran away. I've gone over this in another video. I'm not going to cover it all now, but if you see a drunk guy in the street, you shouldn't kill him, Another point that I'd like to make here is that with a system like Pavlov, you start to really understand just how important the actual system, the actual social contract is. The social contract that says from one neighbor to the next, or from one business partner to the next, hey, if you screw me over, I'm going to screw you over again. Or, hey, we can both trust in each other that we're going to do what's best for us, and that just so happens to be what's also best for the other person. It seems a little bit ironic to me that so many of the great proponents for objective morality, well, this is, first of all, something that can't be shown to anyone, right? Show me the objective morality. Show me where in the forest can I walk where objective morality grows and I can read it, and it's the same for everybody. If objective morality is just something that God is aware of and can only kind of tell us the teachings from down here, if I interpret the rule one way and you interpret it a different way, is that still us following the same rule objectively? If we're seeing things through the lens that is ourselves, it doesn't make sense to me. This is where I get to the old question of capitalism and objective morality. Capitalism, a system which I am pretty sure that most theists are a fan of. I myself am a very rare capitalistic atheist. I'm a very small government libertarian capitalistic atheist. That's me. I'm running for mayor in a town near you. I'm not. Capitalism runs off of the idea that if I want your money, then I need to build you something. I need to fix something for you. I need to provide something to you that is worth you trading your money. Capitalism isn't, I'm going to try and upsell you for as much as I can, because if I do that, if I'm a plumber and I don't fix your toilet very well and then I charge you too much, then I'm not going to stay in business for very long. So the most advantageous thing for me as your plumber would be to fix your toilet better than anybody can, faster than anybody can, for less money than anybody can. That would be the most selfish thing for me to do as a capitalist plumber. Now, it seems like a country that ran on a system like that would operate very well. It would allow the best businesses to rise to the top. It would allow people to have a whole bunch of choices when it comes to where they're going to get their next product or service. And yeah, could it go overboard a little bit? And maybe could we become a little bit too obsessed with consuming everything and buying the next new thing? Yeah, it would be a dance of finding out how much do I need to get to make me happy? Where does happiness come from? Maybe that's a question that philosophy and religion could attempt to unpack for us. Maybe how we could learn to be at peace with ourselves. But as far as objective morality and the best way for a society to interact with itself, I see no reason whatsoever to believe that we need a man in the sky that no one has proven exists, by the way, so far, and the rules that either come from him and that's why they're good, or he tells us to do them because they're good. Either way, I see no reason for that thing to exist if all we really have to do is put systems in place that benefit both parties in any given transaction. You might be thinking, man, systems in place? That's tricky. It's tricky to put a brand new system in place that makes all of the cogs in society spin at the same speed together and kind of hum in unison. That seems like something that would be really complicated. Well, no, it's actually not. You see, bats, vampire bats, they're in a clip that we're going to talk about in a second here. Vampire bats have figured out how to create a little tiny system that gets all of their young fed. Chimpanzees have figured out who should we elect to be our leader, what type of traits would we like to see in our leader, and those are bats and chimpanzees, okay? They're not nearly as intelligent as we are. They're not nearly as aware of the future as we are. They have nearly, look, if we were superheroes, then like human beings are like the OP, like Superman, and bats and chimpanzees are like Elastigirl, Aquaman. They're not that impressive compared to us. I think that Jesus plays an important role in the timeline of, where does forgiveness belong in the social contract? I think that Jesus is a very important mythological character who helps kind of bring some of these stories to life. I do not think that any of it has to be true or literal in any way for the value necessary to act in the world to still be there. So that is it. I'm going to put 2 more clips. One is cutting right back into this lecture, kind of where we left off, where now Sapolsky is going to give an example of the vampire bats and how they've created a system that helps them weed out people who are betraying them. And the other is Jordan Peterson talking about chimpanzees. And I just want to reiterate, first of all, Jordan Peterson talking about chimpanzees is pretty much all of Jordan Peterson. So enjoy the last part of the video. Thank you for being here. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, I would appreciate you hitting the subscribe button. So please do that. Please share this with a friend who you think would be interested in this type of content. I'll see you all in the next one.
So there's Axelrod and his buddies using terms like, oh, this strategy will drive the other one into extinction. Or this strategy works, but if you program in that every now and then there could be a glitch, there can be a mutation, this will be, they're using all this biology jargon, obviously metaphorically, but right around this point, the biologists look at this, who are just beginning to think about the sociobiology stuff, formal patterns of optimizing behavior, and they say, whoa, does this apply to the behavior of real organisms? And that's when people, now armed with their insights into prisoner's dilemma and tit for tat and all this stuff, started to go and study animals out in the wild and see, were there any examples where this happened? Yes, in all sorts of interesting realms. First example, vampire bats. Vampire bats, we are all set up to be creeped out by vampire bats, but in actuality, when you see a vampire bat drinking the blood of some cow or something, you are watching a mommy getting food for her babies, because vampire bat mothers are not actually drinking the blood, they're filling up this throat sac thing, and they go back to the nest and they disgorge the blood to feed their babies. She's just watching out for her kids. It happens that vampire bats have an interesting system of reciprocal altruism, which is a whole bunch of females will share the same nest. Will have all their kids in there mixed in, and these are not necessarily related, so we've just left the world of kin selection. They're not necessarily related, but they have a reciprocal altruist system. Each female comes in, disgorges the blood, and feeds everybody's babies. And they all feed each other's babies, and everything is terrific. And they have this blood vampire commune going there, and they have reached a nice state of stable cooperation. Now, make the bats think that one of the females is cheating on them. Out comes that female flying off to find some blood, and instead you net her and get a hold of her and take some syringe full of air and pump up the throat sac, so the throat sac is really full and distended, but there's no blood in there. You've just pumped air into there, and stick her back into the nest there, and she's just sitting there happily, and the other females are sitting saying, look at her, look at how much blood she's got there. I can't believe it, because she's not feeding our kids. She's cheating on us, and the next time they go out to feed, the other females don't feed her kids. A tit for tat.
So then the question is something like, well, if we're embedded in a hierarchy, and we have been forever, that's about 350 million years, by the way, is there a set of attributes that tends reliably to move you up the hierarchy? Because if there is, you see, going up the hierarchy increases the probability of reproductive success. So there's actually nothing more important to determine over the course of 350 million years inside a hierarchy than how it is that you ratchet yourself up the hierarchy reliably. And you could think about that in some sense as the source of ideals. Well, here's a kind of a concrete way of thinking about that. You know, if you get 100 men together, they're going to organize themselves into a hierarchical structure. They have to, or they're going to stay chaotic and fight. That's the other alternative. And so, but the way that the people who are going to rise to the top, they might rise to the top because of their sheer physical prowess and power, but they also might rise to the top because they're very competent at certain things. And it's as if all the men are going to get together and vote, and maybe that would actually happen, to determine who best embodies the spirit of the group and who should be granted leadership. And in an evolutionary context, by the way, that would also help ensure that that person would propagate their genes into the next generation. And it's not a trivial effect, especially among men. It's a big effect, because roughly speaking, half of all men are not reproductively successful. So there's a wicked culling, let's say, among men. Well, you can see this among chimpanzees as well. They have dominance hierarchies. Some sort of chimps rise to the top, and you might think, well, that's the like caveman chimp who's best at pounding out all the rivals, but it turns out that that's not exactly the case, and Frans de Waal has done a very good job of detailing this with his work on chimpanzees in particular, and he's found that the power-hungry tyrant sort of chimp can rule for a while, but he tends to have a very unstable kingdom. And the reason for that is he's not very good at mutually grooming, he's not good at socially connecting with other males, and he isn't popular among the females and doesn't attend to the young, essentially. And so what happens is, even if he's like the meanest, toughest guy on the block, two subordinate chimps team up, they make friends, they groom each other, and they have each other's backs. And you know, one day he's having an off day because he ate too many fermented bananas the night before, and like they just tear him into pieces. And chimps are unbelievably strong and unbelievably brutal. Anyways, what de Waal found was that it's actually chimps that are more, you might say, humane. Although chimpane, I don't know what the equivalent is. Let's say humane, that manage to produce hierarchies that are more stable and actually manage to stay alive on top of them for much longer periods of time. And he thinks about that as the emergence of an implicit morality, right? It's a morality that's acted out. So then you think, well, there are different ways of climbing up a hierarchy. There are worse and better ways. The better ways allow you to live longer in a more stable hierarchy, and the evolutionary payoff for that is that you leave more descendants. And so the hierarchy itself becomes a very powerful shaping mechanism that determines how it is that people are going to adapt, because it's the primary method of selection. So there's an ethic in there. There's an ethic that emerges from the social interactions, but that's rapidly transformed into a biological selection device. And that's especially true among human beings, because with chimps, the females are indiscriminate maters, which is to say that a female chimp in heat will mate with any male chimp. Now, the dominant males chase the subordinate males away, so they're still more likely to leave offspring than the subordinates, but it's not because of the females. But human females are different. Human females exert choice, and quite brutal choice, you might put it that way. They're very choosy, and it's one of the things that seems to have distinguished us from chimpanzees. And what roughly seems to happen is that the male dominance hierarchy elects men to the higher, say, rungs of the hierarchy, and then the females peel from the top. And so that means that what you can say is that human beings are the consequence of intense male dominance competition. It's not necessarily dominance, but it's competition for the upper rungs of the hierarchy mediated by female selection.